All right. Hello, it's Mrs. Erickson here, and I'm just going to start off with what is distance learning and a general format for what my classes will look like. Obviously, this is a very fluid situation, and it can change on the drop of a hat. So I just thought I'd share with you what we've been told as teachers and kind of lay out some expectations that you can expect in my classroom, and we'll go from there. So we got this we got a 26-page document from the Minnesota Department of Education defining what distance learning is. And it's basically students engaged in distant learning have access to appropriate materials and receive daily interaction with their licensed teachers. Now, what that interaction looks like, it could be a video lecture with some questions that you have to answer at the end, and it's due that day. Or it could be an iRemind text, or it could be an email, or a Zoom session, or some type of video conferencing. So it's very broad in what it can look like, but the bottom line is every single day I have to reach out to you in some way, or you have to complete something so I know that you did it that day. And the purpose of it is really to track your attendance, because let's face it, you are still students and I'm still a teacher. And so it's tracking attendance of both students and teachers. So like you have to be available from 8:30 to 3:30 every day. I have to be available from 8:30 to 3:30 today. This is not like an online, class in college where you could potentially get everything done in one day and enjoy the rest of your week. It is not like that at all. It is a daily progression of the content. So the general format on days, just like today, where it's just a video lecture, I'm going to have you answer just a one-question exit card, which is found on Google Classroom. And the cool thing is, we're not going to meet as a class those days. You can just watch it on your own. So if you are an early bird riser, you get up at 7, you knock out that 10-minute lecture, you answer that one question, you're done with life science for the day. But you have until 11:59, basically before midnight. And if you do not complete that exit card, I will mark you absent. Okay? You all have active notes. So I do expect you to follow along. I will post active notes if you need them, if you lost them, on Google Classroom. And at the end of the chapter, we'll figure out a way to turn it in, probably just pictures, and you email them to me or put them through Google Classroom. My plan is to Zoom at least 2 times a week, at least, if not once, for just to check in, face-to-face contact, and if you have any homework questions. And these could be really, really short. Like if it's really, if no one has any homework questions because, you got it done and it wasn't that hard, it could literally just be a 2-minute Zoom session where everyone just logs in. They say, hey, Mrs. Erickson, how's it going? We chat for a little bit. I just want to make sure that you're okay, and maybe give you an outline of what the rest of the week will look like. But Zoom sessions, you really need to be there. And so we'll probably have them scheduled during our regular class time, somewhere around 2:30. As of right now. Actually, that's kind of up in the air too. So I'll let you know when I know. But Zoom and exit cards, they do count towards your attendance. Okay? If you can't make a Zoom session, you're absent unless you contacted me before the Zoom session. I don't want to hear about it after the fact. If you know you're not going to make a Zoom session because, maybe you're with a parent and you have an appointment of some kind or whatever. The bottom line is that you are still a student and you need to communicate if you are not going to make it to a Zoom session. So just want to lay that out there. So what can you expect for assignments in life science? A little bit less rigorous as usual. You know how usually every day I kind of gave you something? Basically, I'm going to try to limit it to just 2 worksheets a week or 2 assignments a week. So you get a lot of time to work on it, 2 to 3 days to complete them, but my deadline is very strict. Okay? It will be due that day by 3:30 p.m., not after the fact. Okay? You will be graded on active notes. Why not? You're going to be watching these video lectures. You might as well follow along instead of just sitting there absent-mindedly trying to soak in that information. Exit cards, part of the assignment, as well as part of your attendance. Tests and quizzes, well, now that we're kind of doing this distance learning thing, I can't really proctor those. But if I do give out short quizzes for a chapter, I'm just going to assume it's open note or open book, and we'll just go from there. But this is all I have so far. Like I said, it could change. So what I'd like to do now is just quickly go through the first section of Chapter 9. I know most of you already have notes, but there were some kids that were absent on Monday or Tuesday before we left for this break. And so we started off Chapter 9 talking about what is a plant, okay? So objectives, what characteristics do all plants share? What were some of the adaptations they had to overcome in order to survive on land and Earth's changing environments? And then the new notes that you have not gotten, how are plants classified? So first off, what is a plant? Look at the cell structure. They're eukaryotic organisms. They are multicellular. All of their cells have a nucleus and organelle. They do differ from animal cells in a few different ways. They're green for a reason. They have these organelles called chloroplasts that absorb light energy for the process of photosynthesis. A cell wall that provides protection and support, and we'll talk more about that cell wall and what it's made up of. And vacuoles that store water and sap and any other materials that the plant needs it to store. Plant cells are also very boxy looking. So I believe in your active notes you had to label some features. So we have our central vacuole and our cell wall on the outside. I know this isn't very boxy-like, but it is kind of angular. It's not very round like an animal cell. Okay. Nucleus, that's the brain of the cell, where DNA is found. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. We have our cell membrane that lies just on the inside of that cell wall. And then there's that chloroplast where photosynthesis takes place. So I just said that they are multicellular. They're made up of many cells. And each cell is very specific as to what it does. So like a root cell is very different from a leaf cell. A root cell's primary job would be to store things, to absorb water and nutrients from the soil and move it up the plant. Whereas in a leaf cell, you find a lot of chlorophyll and chloroplasts, and it undergoes the process of photosynthesis to make sugars or food for the plant. So this leads us to our next bullet points, that plants are producers. They make their own food from some type of outside energy source, in this case, the sun. We've talked about photosynthesis before. Remember, you can trace like anything pretty much back to the sun and to a plant, So if you woke up this morning and had bacon for breakfast, all right, bacon comes from a pig. Pigs eat some type of grain, which is a plant. Plants get their energy from the sun. So this process is photosynthesis, and all organisms do depend on producers for our food. So photosynthesis, what is it? Photo means light, synthesis means to put together. It does require a few ingredients. You need water and CO2, which is the air that we breathe out, along with sunlight, and you're going to make oxygen, which is good for us because we breathe that in, and glucose, also known as sugar. I will also accept food. So I asked this question in class, where does water come from? People said it comes from the sky, it rains, yep. If you're a plant, where do you get your water from? You're going to say probably from the soil. Where does CO2, carbon dioxide, come from? Well, that comes from the atmosphere, and it's from animals. Animals exhale that out. What do plants produce for us? Two things, two very, very important things, oxygen and glucose. Remember, when Earth was very, very young, okay? Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but in its early stages, it didn't have any oxygen in its atmosphere. And now it has 22%. So we can thank cyanobacteria, bacteria that underwent photosynthesis, for producing oxygen molecules that we're breathing today. And then obviously, glucose. We need that in order to carry out all metabolism inside of ourselves. So then we had an assignment, Plant Day questions. And so, if you didn't get that done, they're also in your notes. You can take a picture and email it to me at any time. Okay. The second part was plant adaptations. How did plants evolve to live on land? Because all life started in the water. And so land plants share a common ancestor of green algae. We know this by fossil records. They have similar chemicals. They have similar DNA. The early plants had to live in moist areas because they didn't have all those adaptations to live far away from water as a resource. But life on land in the early stages, there was lots of sunlight and there was plenty of CO2 in the air for them to convert into oxygen as a waste product for them. So some adaptations that plants developed. The first one is protection. So we have to prevent plants from drying out. So they developed a cuticle very waxy protective layer found on leaves, stems, and flowers, basically any part above the surface. And it helps slow the evaporation of water from a plant's surface. It doesn't want to lose water. It needs water to make photosynthesis, to do photosynthesis and make sugars. Not only that, it protects them from insects because they have a very, very thick cuticle. I mean, who wants to eat wax? Who wants to, chew through that to get to the good stuff? So you can see in this picture, I know it's a little bit blurry, but we have a wax cuticle here, and we do have a wax cuticle underneath the leaf. But notice we do have openings that allow for gas exchange. Like CO2 is going to come in, and oxygen is going to come out. So another diagram showing this waxy cuticle on the top, as well as on the bottom. But we do have openings that allow for gas exchange. Another adaptation is support. So our early plants were supported by surrounding water, gave them a little buoyancy, they could float. But now that we're on land, we don't have that support. And if you're laying on the ground, there's a lot of heat on that ground, which means they're going to dry out. So plants developed a type of cell wall made of cellulose that could strengthen them, and they can stand a little bit more upright and stay off the ground as much as possible. So the cell wall is made up of cellulose, chains of glucose molecules that are very hard for us to break down. This is why when you eat corn, corn comes out because corn has a lot of cellulose in it. Okay. Some plants did form lignin, basically the woody part of any plant. So if you come across a shrub or something that looks woody, you can rest assured it has lignin in it. So it just strengthens cellulose and makes it a little bit more rigid. So if we look at our leaf cell and zoom in on those cell walls, you can see that it's made of cellulose fibers that are crisscrossed together, and you can pull out those individual strings and you can see that it's made up of glucose molecules. Here's a glucose molecule, here's a glucose molecule, here's a glucose molecule, here's a glucose molecule. But the cool thing about these glucose molecules is that they're arranged upside down. So like upright, upside down, upright, upside down. And so they alternate this pattern, and this is why we can't break it down. We have enzymes that do not recognize this upright, upside down feature of glucose. All right, plants had to find a way to transport materials because in early plants, when they're just floating in water, they moved materials through diffusion and osmosis, concentrations of high concentrations to low concentrations. So grasses and trees do have vascular tissue, and we're going to talk a lot about vascular tissues today, but there's two types of vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. Xylem moves water, phloem moves food, and they're tube-like cells, and they're basically just tiny little tubes inside the plant that move things up and down. Reproduction. If you are an aquatic plant, water carries your reproductive cells from one plant to the other. But with land plants, they had to evolve a lot of different strategies, like wind. So you can see here from a pine tree, the wind's kind of shaking off the spores, or the pollen, I should say not spores, pollen of this male pine cone. Water and the use of animals. There's different ways too, but these are the three big ones that your book mentions. So then we had an assignment, the Plant B questions. So if you did not get those in, just answer them. Make sure you put Plant B questions in your name at the top, snap a picture, email it to me. Okay, the last thing, these are the notes that you do not have. Plant classification. How do we classify plants? So we're just going to classify them into two groups. When you take college biology or biology in the future, where there's going to be a little bit more subgroups. But for now, for life science, we're going to call it seedless and seed plants. Pretty simple. So seedless plants, it's because they don't have seeds. And in fact, instead of seeds, they have spores. So some great example of seedless plants are liverworts and mosses. As you can see here, this is a liverwort and this is a moss. Another unique feature about seedless plants is that they do not have flowers. Now, in your homework assignment today, they might ask you a question that says, they use vascular tissue to move nutrients through the plant. Is it seed plants, seedless plants, or both? I want you to put both, okay? And the reason for that is not all seedless plants are nonvascular plants. So nonvascular means they don't have xylem or phloem, or no vascular tissue. But there is one group of seedless plants that do, and it is ferns. So if you come across a homework question that says, you're comparing and contrasting seed plants versus seedless plants, you're going to say for both. I know it's tricky. I want you to put both, that they both have vascular tissue, even though the majority of seedless plants do not. Now, seed plants, on the other hand, they produce flowers and fruit with their seeds. A lot of plants that you recognize are seed plants. Grass, seed plant. Trees, seed plant. Flowers, seed plants. If they make a seed, a lot of times they might have tissues around it that will protect and nourish the plant embryo. A plant embryo is just a developing baby plant, just waiting to come out and germinate. Seed plants also have vascular tissues. Now, my final slide is not in your notes, because I just want to emphasize what do they have in common. Okay, first off, they both are plants. And remember what it takes. What does it take to be a plant? What do you have to have in common to be a plant? First off, you have to both evolve from green algae, share a common ancestor. That's all plants. You have to be a producer, carry out the process of photosynthesis, make your own food. You have to be multicellular, made up of many cells. You have to have cell walls made of cellulose. You have to, protect yourself so you don't dry out. So maybe there's a presence of cuticle. Okay, so I just wanted to emphasize that they do have a lot of things in common, but they do have some things that are different from each other. Okay, so that concludes the 9.1 notes. You do have an assignment. It's a 9.1 worksheet that will be due on Wednesday. Not to mention that after you are done watching this lecture, you need to go to Google Classroom and just answer a one-question exit card to get credit or attendance for watching this. Remember, you can watch this video at any time for video lectures as long as you answer that one exit card question before midnight tonight. I'm just going to end it right there. So I hope you guys have a good day. I do miss you and hope to see you soon.